Hello, Honors U.S. History students. Real quick, if you are opening this video, make sure that you pause it so you can get out some paper and pencil, maybe even some highlighters and that sort of thing. And this is going to be a review of some of the stuff you guys have been reading on the Great Depression and the New Deal. So definitely maybe have out those items as well, those readings, but also make sure you have available your Unit 4 packet, because we are going to look at a couple of those cartoons that are in that packet while we look through our video today. All right, so again, pause it real quick so you can get those materials. All right, so we're going to start with our list of causes of the Depression. All right, so we have several major causes. And again, these are not all of the causes we have, but this is a review. So this should be kind of reviewing some of the stuff that you've been reading. You should see some similarity with what you read and what we have right here. All right, so one of our big things, overproduction. All right, our factories during the 1920s, it's too great of a job. We produce too much stuff. And so we have all of this supply, but no demand. Europe is still struggling economically from the First World War. They can't really buy our stuff. And this depression is going to be a worldwide global depression. It's going to be affecting everyone. Under consumption, that totally makes sense. People don't have money. If you don't have money, you're not going to buy things. And if no one's buying anything and your company's already made a lot of those products, you don't need your factory open anymore. So you're going to be firing those workers because you don't need them, right? We also have some issues with the stock market. We have stock market speculation. So this is definitely a word you need to know what it means, right? So speculation is buying cheap stock, hoping it will improve. So if you buy something that's really cheap, you're hoping that that particular product will go up in price. And then when it goes up in price, you sell it for a profit. And this is okay, sort of, if you're having a few people do it, but when everyone is doing it and then everyone sells at the same time, you're going to have a crash in that stock market. And that crash is going to be nicknamed Black Tuesday, and that is October 29th, 1929, where we are going to be losing over $30 billion of US money. Now that is $30 billion in 1929 money. We would have to look at an inflation calculator online to figure out what it would be today, but let's just say lots and lots and lots. So we're going to have lots of issues with that. We're going to also see a large disparity in wealth, right? So farmers are in debt. They were in debt during the 1920s. We're seeing a shift from coal to oil. Our workers, their wages aren't increasing, and we have 1% of the population owns 40% of the wealth. Here's an interesting chart here, right, that I like to bring in. Here is our 1923 to 1929, right? This is the bottom 90%. Here's the top 1%. Here's more recently, I realize it's a little old, but 2002 to 2007, before the Great Recession of 2008, looks pretty similar. So definitely some similarities there that you could use for a synthesis essay, hint, hint, between the Great Depression and the Great Recession, right, that happened in 2008, right? And here is an old quote back from that 2008 recession from Senator Bernie Sanders. He was a senator then, still a senator now, that a nation will not survive morally or economically when so few have so much while so many have so little. And that's definitely a reflection of this chart here, which we can see that reflection also in the 1920s before the Great Depression, right? So to look at some charts and things like that, right, this is what our stock market looked like during that time period, right? Roaring 20s, right? Everything, people are buying all sorts of stuff, things are great. And then this is your Black Tuesday, right? Really quick jump all the way down. And then we're going to see a short recession, but it really bottoms out all the way down into 1932. And that is going to be where, when one of the readings you had on the New Deal, right, 1932 is the election of 32 between Hoover and FDR, right? This bottoming out is really going to be the shift between Hoover and that Republican Party and FDR and the Democratic Party. This is also going to be where you're going to see the switch between the Democrats and Republicans when it comes to who should intervene more in American lives. Should it be state governments or federal governments? And so that's where we see that switch happening then. You can definitely see a parallel with that new philosophy nowadays, right? Where you have the Democratic Party is going to be more about having the federal government make decisions for the United States, and your Republican Party is going to be more about the state governments making those decisions for individuals. So when you've seen several states nowadays that have closed everything for those states because of the coronavirus, right? Those a lot of those governors are going to be Republican. So again, state control, right? And so you see some of that similarity. This is not the case for all of those particular governors, but you are seeing some of that philosophy being repeated with, is it government control or state control? And again, with situations that are so chaotic as in a Great Depression or the pandemic that we're currently in, who knows if which decision is the right one. We'll find out in the next coming months or years, right? But for kind of a funny little joke on this, right, this is sort of what that stock market looks like. It's like, oh my gosh, it's great, and then it just falls off. That's a roller coaster I would love to be riding. That would be amazing, right? And our next thing, right, we have here is the banking crisis. So again, this was in one of your readings, right? Everybody panics, right? So because they don't have a job, so they got to go to the bank and get their money, and everyone starts withdrawing all their money out of the banks. The banks don't have all of that money actually in their vaults, and so you're going to see a lot of these banks are going to fail. So one of the things to notice between this and the stuff you read on the New Deal, right, is that we're going to create something called the FDIC, which we still have today, right? And that is all of your banks are going to be backed by the federal government, right? However, it's only banks that have an FDIC affiliation. So if you have a credit union, they are not included in that. But this is something that happened. Everybody's going to lose all their money. Think of this as just this little chart here of our profits are plummeting. It's Europe can't buy our stuff, right? And then it just keeps going all around, all around, all around. Okay, so we're all kind of connected here, right? We have lots of charts going on here. And again, charts are good for us to look at. Sometimes charts are really easy. Sometimes we need a little help on them. So that's why we got to practice. So we got unemployment here, right? 1929, it was 3% before the crash. During the worst part of the Depression, up to 25%, right? Here we have an increase in bank failures, business failures, per capita income and spending. That means how much money per person in the United States. So you can see this just is going down and down and down, right? So lots of horrible things are going on. Another topic we had in your guys' reading was about the Dust Bowl. So out in the middle of the country, the Great Plains, so right smack dab in the middle of the United States, is where we're going to see a major drought, where we're going to have overproduction of the soil, a drought where it's not going to rain very much for an entire 10 years. And this is going to create all these storms. Farmers don't have any food. They can't sell anything. Things are really bad. So here we have one. It's called a black blizzard because this is just all dust that's just going all over the place. This video here I'm going to link into the description down below. So if you want to take a quick pause on this, open that video in another tab to watch it before you move on to other things, I'd highly recommend it. All right. So for our next thing we got going on here that you guys saw some stuff in your readings was of Hoovervilles, right? So Hoovervilles are going to be shanty towns. So this, you can definitely tell these houses are just made out of random materials, right? And these are going to be built by people who are homeless, and they're going to nickname them Hoovervilles to make fun of President Hoover because he didn't always approve of what he was doing, right? Now, a lot of those people that left the Dust Bowl are going to be called Okies because they're going to go to Oklahoma, right? This is talked about in the book The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. That's also a movie that they made about this. So if you are interested in this topic, seeing what's going on, want to add a little classic culture there, you can go and watch this older movie, The Grapes of Wrath. I'm sure you can find it online kind of wherever since it is an older film. So some of the stuff when you guys were reading, you had some things that were going on. So our unemployment is 25%, right? At this time period, that's about 89 million Americans. Our homeless is 2 million Americans. Women and minorities are the first ones to be fired from jobs because, well, minorities, racism, and women because it was usually considered the man was supposed to be bringing home money. So obviously if you have a single mother or something like that, things are going to be really, really bad for those people. So like the Depression was bad, but for certain groups of people, it's going to be extremely, extremely difficult. All right. So one of the readings you had was on Hoover's response, all right, to the Depression, to this crash. And his big thing is he wants to help out businesses, not the people. He thought if he helped out businesses that they could hire people back. He opposes welfare for the poor. He doesn't want to give people a handout thinking that they might take advantage of that and not want to go back to work. And he's reluctant to have the national government help out, right? So this is where you're going to see this associated with the Republican Party. FDR will be a Democrat, and so he will be the opposite of these things, right? Hoover honestly, these are not awful things to be talking about. However, he didn't realize that the Depression was going to get as bad as it actually did. If he knew it was going to be as bad as it did, he would have definitely changed his mind on some of these decisions. Again, Hoovervilles are those shanty towns. We saw some pictures of those. And we also have the incident of the Bonus Army. Now, the Bonus Army, they're a bunch of veterans from World War I that are they were promised a bonus, right? Several years after the war was over. It was actually supposed to be in 1940. Well, it's 1930, 1932. They're like, we need this money now. So you have 20,000 of these unemployed veterans are going to go march on Washington demanding this bonus. So they want their pensions, right? Okay, that they were promised from the war. And in order to get them, they're going to set up camps across the street from the Capitol building, and they refuse to leave. Hoover makes a horrible decision and tells his military to just get rid of the Bonus Army camps, just deal with them. Well, by saying deal with them is the military came in with tanks and tear gas and destroyed the camps. People died in the process of this, and this is kind of like the last straw in the process of getting rid of Hoover, right? This is going to be extremely unpopular because all these people wanted, and these are our war veterans that are supposed to be heroes, all they wanted was their bonus, and several of them were killed. Okay, so things are not good. Okay. One of our last things that happens here at the beginning is that prohibition will be repealed, and that is with the 21st Amendment. I told you guys the little way to remember that before was 21 is the age to drink, and so 21 is when America got to drink again. Right? We're going to look at a couple cartoons here, all right, to make sure you guys are reviewing these. These are all cartoons that were in your guys' reading on the New Deal. So here we have Roosevelt is the captain of our boat. He's sailing with the American people to recovery. So think of like we're leaving the storm of the Depression, going towards the rainbow of good times. Over here are people who don't agree with him. So detractors, they're the ones who are saying, oh, you're doing a bad job. We don't believe what you're doing. Think of them as kind of like backseat drivers. And so these guys are not in favor of what he's doing, but obviously the American people are. Okay. Here's another one of your cartoons. Congress is labeled here on a snail. So remember, a snail is notorious for being extremely slow. However, Roosevelt here with his New Deal program in his back pocket is making this snail gallop. So it's kind of like whipping Congress into shape, if you will. And our next cartoon here, before I move on to the New Deal, is FDR wanted to pack the courts. This is the court packing scheme. We're going to see some more of this here in a little bit. And with the court packing scheme, he wanted to add more Supreme Court justices to the court in order to get a lot of his programs passed for the New Deal. However, this was seen as a bad thing. This is totally this bad move by Roosevelt, bad decision. And basically what he did is all these people, if he would appoint them, would have just become yes men, right? They would have just agreed with whatever Roosevelt did. They would have been biased towards him. So when people point this out that it is corrupt and not good, he backs off and is like, okay, my bad, and does not implement packing the court. Right. Our next section here is going to be on the New Deal. So we have Roosevelt has become president. Right? And let's see what's going on. So we got, and again, this is review, so a lot of these things will be brief. Definitely make sure you're reading those packets of stuff on the New Deal. It's going to have a lot more detail. Right. So for domestic policy, all right, the New Deal, we're going to have a brain trust. So he's going to hire a bunch of these people for his new cabinet that are going to be really, really smart people to try and figure out how can we fix the Depression. And one of their ideas is to have a bank holiday. So when you go on holiday, you're going on vacation. So we're going to close the banks for a couple days, basically to make sure that everybody can stop pulling their money out of the bank, restructure a few things, and then we will create the FDIC. Right? So the FDIC is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, right? And that is going to guarantee that our money is safe, right? Again, this stuff is going to be in your reading, and we'll have a chart here in a little bit that you can pause on that gives over all the different organizations. Right? So the New Deal itself is going to have the 3 R's: relief, recovery, and reform. So for relief, we're giving people money. For recovery, we're giving people jobs. For reform, we're trying to fix something so it doesn't become a problem in the future. Every week, he would have these things called fireside chats, where he would go on the radio and have the little crackling fire in the background and be telling everybody, this is what we're planning to do. Also during these chats on the radio, he would also like be very honest with the people and be like, hey, we tried this, it didn't work. So that's one of the things that people really liked about him, is that he was able to communicate directly with the people, and it made them feel comfortable, like they knew him. Now, it's one of those things that we kind of have that sort of thing nowadays with Twitter, to be perfectly honest. Now, not everybody always agrees with what is on Twitter, because sometimes it's hard to explain something in only a short amount of characters. But it's that idea where a lot of people are getting information that way from presidential authority and stuff like that, just because of that quick connection that we would have with somebody who is in charge of our country. So you can have some similarities between these fireside chats and Twitter. Roosevelt is going to be helped by his wife Eleanor throughout all of the time period of his presidency, and she's going to be going on tours all over the place, telling people about his programs, helping out. Now, again, go back and read through your article to figure out, why does he need help? Why can he not do this on his own? So definitely figure out what's going on with why can't Roosevelt just go on all these tours talking to everyone around the country? Right, so here's a real quick review of that relief, recovery, and reform. So pause on there if you need to read through that, if what I talked about earlier didn't make sense, or that part did not make sense in your reading. Okay. Here's another part where you can pause and look through. Here is a real quick overview of a bunch of the different New Deal programs. There's more in here than we will talk about, or that is in your reading and things like that. If it's not in your reading or in your vocabulary list, don't worry about it. But here's a kind of like a quick overview if you want to pause real quick. Right, and so we had that Supreme Court court packing scandal. So if you want to pause real quick, you can, and go ahead and get out that packet. This is the shadow picture, the menacing shadow that is in your guys' packet. This is on the end of course all the time, which is why it is in your packet under the 1930s. So kind of bring that up so you can work on that while we're talking about it. So this is dealing with that court packing scheme. So he basically said, hey, if I add, there's only 9 justices said in the Constitution. Well, if I add 15, because it says the president can add justices, that'll help me out so that my programs will be approved. Obviously that is kind of seen as corrupt, right? That you're packing the court in your favor, so this does not go over very well. So in our cartoon, you have a donkey here, right? The donkey is supposed to represent the Democrats, which is FDR's party, right? And it says absolute political control of our courts, right? And this guy over here is supposed to be panicking, and it says President Roosevelt's plea for power to pack the Supreme Court. So this is all about this corruption aspect of the court packing scheme. Now, this plan does not go through, right? Because FDR backs off because he realizes, like, oop, my bad, that was not a good idea, right? Now, overall, the New Deal does not fix the Depression, right? The Depression is only going to be fixed by World War II. However, we do have a legacy of the Depression, and that restores hope. Right? This idea that we, in times when they're tough, we will rely on the national government to help us, and that things will be okay, right? But it does not. So the New Deal does not stop the Depression. World War II is what's going to stop the Depression, because now all of our factories will open, people will have jobs again, things like that. Okay, now we saw earlier that the 2008 recession could be compared to the Great Depression. Well, 2008 recession was when Obama is going to be elected after that, right? The Depression starts and FDR is elected. So the New York Times is going to create this cover here in 2008 to kind of have a comparison between FDR and Obama, with this idea of they're both being elected during a time period of economic crisis. And again, their election is more of the idea of like, we want you to fix this problem. Okay, so nice comparison between those two guys. All right, so we're going to do a real quick, how does World War II get involved with the United States? So here we got a real quick review, right? This is from world history, all right? How does the war start in Europe? It all starts because of World War I. So Hitler is going to be elected by the people of Germany because the economy is horrible, right? And so they're looking for somebody to come in who has a lot of confidence to fix things, right? And so they elect him, and it's totally a free, open election, all that sort of stuff, all right? And one of the things he's going to try to do is take back places that were taken by the Treaty of Versailles away from Germany. So he's going to take back the area of Poland that was taken from Germany. And so invading Poland, you don't invade another country. It's not a good idea. But he invades Poland. He also is going to start taking over all these other places. And we have this term appeasement, right? So this should be familiar from world history. If it's not, that's why we're going over it. All right, so appeasement is when the rest of Europe is basically giving in to him, letting him do whatever he wants because they want to avoid war that badly, right? They're so scared of war that they're like, yeah, go ahead and give him a little piece of this land, give him a little piece of that land, let him do this and that. Maybe he'll get over it, right? And he'll stop. But he doesn't, and that's when World War II will get started. Think of appeasement as like if you've seen at a store a little kid pitching a fit and whining and screaming and all sorts of stuff like that they want candy. You have one parent that tells them, no, you can't have it, and drags them out of the store, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed, like you're not going to ever be in that store again. And then you have the parent that goes ahead and gives them the candy or the toy or whatever they whined about, and now that child has figured out, if I want something, I'm going to whine and scream to get my way. By giving into that, that is appeasement, right? So kind of a comparison that we can kind of relate to more in our everyday lives. So World War I, we were isolationists. World War II, doing the same thing, right? So we have these two cartoons. They might look a little familiar because they are both by Dr. Seuss, right? So that's why they look slightly familiar, even if you haven't seen these particular cartoons. So over here, this is supposed to be the American bald eagle, right? And he is hanging out all by himself on this tree, minding his own business. And we over here have Hitler, right, is this bird. So it's basically supposed to be like a woodpecker who is chopping down all of these trees, and all the trees are named after these other countries. And so the American is saying when he's finished pecking down that last tree, he'll quite likely be tired. So we're just kind of ignoring him, thinking, oh, he'll wear himself out. That's not going to happen, all right? So definitely Dr. Seuss is kind of telling us we need to watch out. He's not going to get tired, right? Over here in this particular cartoon, there was a group of people at the time period called America's First Committee, and America's First Committee actually thought that Roosevelt was a problem and that he was doing too much during the New Deal, and that we should not listen to him, and we actually should become allies with Germany and Hitler. Yeah, some people actually thought about that. Kind of interesting, kind of scary and terrifying. But America's First Committee, this particular cartoon that Dr. Seuss is making, is pointing out how the American First Committee is not having wise decisions. So in our quote here, it says, "And the wolf chewed up the children and spit out their bones, but those are foreign children, and it really didn't matter." So you can see the shock on the children's faces of like, oh my gosh, like we need to help out, right? Even if it is people from other places. So definitely we're seeing a view from Dr. Seuss with these two cartoons that the US should get involved. We can't just be on the sidelines. All right, so writing down a couple notes. So this idea of like how going from isolationism to war. So obviously Germany invades Poland. We're going to have a series of neutrality acts. If you would look these up online, you're going to find a bunch of them. So we're just going to smush them all together. All right, so neutrality acts were withholding weapons and money from any countries who are fighting during this war. All right. And we're also going to then have the Lend-Lease Act, right? And Lend-Lease, think of if you're lending someone a pencil, you're letting them borrow it. If you're letting someone lease something, you're letting them rent it. So we're giving people like a loan of some sort of thing to help them with the war. So we're going to be loaning tanks, airplanes, things like that. And we're doing this all towards the British, right? That's who we are sending all of this stuff to, right? This cartoon looks familiar, right? With what's going on. So we have, again, Uncle Sam's supposed to be over here, and we're all isolated over this way, all by ourselves. That bug's not going to spread. And over here is Europe with all of these diseases that are happening. And we know now that it's like, if you just stay isolated, it's not necessarily going to stop the spread. It's eventually going to get to you. So again, another one from Dr. Seuss saying that we really should get involved. Okay, all right. Now with the rest of this stuff going on with the war, and again, this is a real basic overview of what's going on. So Japan, Italy, and Germany are going to be the Axis powers. Okay, so that's going to be the bad guys. Then we're going to have the allies on the other side. All right, Japan is going to get involved in the war, and they're going to get the US involved because they're going to invade Manchuria, China. Now, by invading Manchuria, China, they've violated this thing called the open door policy. The open door policy said that everyone is allowed to colonize China, right? You can't just have one country that does it. So that you can't do that. So the US basically is telling Japan, you guys can't do that by having an oil embargo against them. So we do not trade any oil with Japan. Now remember, Japan as an island nation, they need trade in order to get their resources. Right, so as a payback for the embargo, that is when Japan will attack Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor is a naval base in Hawaii, right? You do need to know this date, right? Okay, so December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, all right? That is the date that Pearl Harbor happens. The following day, the US declares war against Japan, all right? So we're going to look at a couple images real quick. So obviously the U.S. declares war, all right? At Pearl Harbor, most of our fleet in Pearl is going to be destroyed. And some of those boats, like the USS Arizona, famously were sunk in the harbor with the majority of their crew on board. So this is an image from the sky of the USS Arizona that was sunk on Pearl Harbor. It is still there today, and so now it is a memorial site, and you can actually, they take ferries out to this, so you can see it, but they kept it all there because it is a memorial and a tomb for all of the men who are on board that ship. And they kept it there because it just seemed fitting to keep that as a memorial location. Right, so guys, that is the end of our notes for the 1930s. What you're going to have coming up here soon is going to be another progress check on this of what's going on, making sure we know what's happening. If you have questions at any point of any of these things, definitely go ahead and send me a message on Remind while you are watching it, and I can get back to your questions as soon as possible. All right, until then, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.